All right. All right. We're starting this thing. We got maybe a few special guests joining. Let me bring on, after I make sure we got, all right. Pat Pinkman is live. Pat, your mic working?
I'm here.
All right. Good. Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. We'll bring up the chat overlay on here so you can see it too, Pink. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. So let's go, Ryan. Let's go, Ryan. Cardboard. I don't know who Ryan is. Caps, welcome back. Right? Yeah, what's up, man? Yeah, guys. So just real quick, obviously, Pink is our Mid-Atlantic advisor. He was the host of the Pitching Hot Stove at the ABCA. He does that every year. So me, Pink, Wally Crancer, we're all at ABCA this year. And so obviously, we're going to be talking about that, kind of things we heard. I don't know about you, Pink. Kane's saying, let's go. I've been itching. Awesome. Kane's, welcome back. So, Pink, I think to start off, and we're going to get to like the hot stove and all the stuff, but I mean, 38-man fall roster. What are your thoughts on that right now? I mean, just positives, maybe some negatives. What are you thinking on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with the way that they're doing it is they're trying to give coaches a little bit of leeway. Yeah. And I think per usual, the NCAA has kind of fallen short where when you had a 35-man roster, I was coaching at Seton Hall in 2022, we would still have roughly 4 to 5 guys on the roster that were either true walk-ons. A couple of times we've kept a kid that just came to the tryout day.
Yeah.
And they were competitive enough where they could give us an extra bat in the lineup, an extra arm on the mound. I mean, when I was coaching at Fordham, I coached a kid, Anthony Zimmerman, who was a legit walk-on, came to the tryout day, ended up getting significant innings for us, especially at fall, but he developed into a professional pitcher. Like he pitched in the minors for a while. So I think they're trying to give a little bit of leeway, but 3 players, I don't know that it helps that much.
Yeah.
It's obviously going to help, but I think if they just said 35-man roster or 40-man, that's going to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
Gives them a little bit more flexibility, but it's better than nothing for
sure. So Cardboard says Seton Hall in the house, and then he says, my bad, Kyle. For some reason, I thought Ryan. No worries, dude. Yeah, obviously Pink was most recently coaching as a pitching coach at Seton Hall. Kane says Matt Swope said on the Perfect Game show that he's not a fan because he doesn't like to over-recruit. The Georgetown recruiting coordinator said he is in favor of a 4 to 6 player taxi squad. What do you think on those, Pink?
I mean, I don't know that any coach really likes to over-recruit. I don't know that any coach likes to recruit the portal. I think they know that they are tools at their disposal, and they're going to do what they can to kind of make sure that their team has the best chance to be successful.
Yeah.
So they're going to use the tools at their disposal. I think if you talk to a number of coaches, I think all of them would say, hey, I'd rather just go back to recruiting high school guys and, just go about it that way. And I think it's because it's the effort that it takes to recruit the portal is so vastly different than the effort that it takes to recruit high school players.
Yeah.
In a timely fashion. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure about the taxi squad. Is that something where it's just guys that are in the wings in case there's injuries?
I would assume the taxi squad is, kind of would be you can't play if you're on the taxi squad, but you can practice with the team.
Yeah.
And then if for some reason there's injuries, you can be elevated from the taxi squad to, the active roster, I guess, as you could say. But obviously, I mean, we still have a lot to kind of find out with some of this stuff. I mean, one of the negatives I was hearing, Pink, at least what was one of the things, I mean, D1 Baseball brought it up, but also I heard, like Butch Thompson told me this before on the flight to the ABCA, that like in his mind, like 34 is enough. even if you get, he's like, it's not about how many injuries you get, it's about the guys that get hurt. Like if you lose your 2 of your top 5 pitchers, you're probably just you're going to be in a tough situation that year. Yeah. But what I heard from a few guys was if with how it is today, if we have to cut down from 38 to 34, and then those 4 guys, or one or two of them, end up suing, and then that becomes a thing that's going around all college baseball, and then the NCAA says, all right, you know what, we're going to allow them to transfer mid-year to other D1s and be eligible. Now you're going to have a whole nother period of recruiting where you got to be super active, because like you and I know, Pink, it's not just going to be, if that becomes a rule, it's not just going to be the 3 guys that got cut. It's going to be oh, maybe this guy can jump up and get a big NIL contract now. So it's going to be another just really active part of the year where coaches are used to kind of having a little bit of time off at that point.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, the coaches are going to adapt. The coaches are going to do what they need to do in order to be successful, whether they like it or not. They're going to have to dabble in the portal. They're going to have to dabble in JUCO. They're going to have a couple of high school kids that just to fall back on.
Yeah.
If the roster size itself is not necessarily an issue if you're just playing games.
Yeah.
But if you have to inter-squad and practice, there's a reason why there's 100 invitees to spring training. You can't compete with a 25-man roster in A-ball or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to do that. I think, it's a whole different conversation if we're talking about, hey, a development team, a taxi roster. I think that's fine. I think if kids know what they're getting into, and they're the 56th man on the fall roster, sure, take advantage of that opportunity. But I think oftentimes what has happened in the past is kids are not aware of their space, where their place in that recruiting class.
Yeah.
So they show up expecting to be one of 10 guys, and it's 18 or 20, and then they're competing against upperclassmen and the 20 freshmen, and it's a lot more difficult. So
yeah,
you can't, there's no real answers to any of these questions right now, other than it's going to take a while to sort it all out.
Yeah, for sure. Kane says, I'm down to over recruit. The kids at the end of the day need to do more research on the roster, like Kyle and I have discussed 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you were kind of saying it, Pink. It's like, if you know what you're getting into, and they've got 20 guys in the recruiting class you're in, and they lost X amount in the previous year, like ultimately you're the one making the decision. So it's not like you were forced at arm's length to commit to the school. That's what you wanted to do. And it ultimately just didn't end up working out. Right.
Right. At some point, accountability with the players and parents and the process has to show its face. Just because your kid isn't good enough to make the team after a second year doesn't mean you need to file a lawsuit.
Yeah.
That's just the way. Sorry to say it that way, but if your goal is to actually play professional baseball, like, what's the discussion we should be having is not, oh, it's not fair. It's how misled were you in the first place to think that you could compete at this level?
Yeah.
Which is a precursor to professional baseball.
Yeah. When
you don't have the ability to compete at a low D1 or even a competitive D2, level.
Yeah.
So I think honestly, the message that I'm hearing from the families that I'm talking to, the clients that I'm talking to, is we don't know what direction to go, but we do know that it's going to be exceptionally harder to get into the Division I college space. So they are a lot more, at least a lot of conversations I'm having, they're a lot more at ease with just saying, hey, whatever opportunity we can get, we're going to be happy with.
Yeah.
It's a completely different ball game.
100%. So guys, remember, if you are looking for help in the recruiting process, scan this QR code. So one of the next things that they did in the proposal, and I guess this is one of two things that will be voted on here in 9 days on January 15th, is moving Pink from 2 outside competition games during the fall to 4. I think there was a proposal to 8, like softball, but they kind of settled on 4. Talk, as a former college coach, talk about having the ability to see how your guys perform, not against the same competition for the entire fall. How big is that in making an evaluation on who are the guys that are going to be getting time on the mound and in the lineup?
Yeah, I think honestly, we were always, at least the staffs that I was on, we were always in favor of more games. It kind of gets to be a little bit of Groundhog Day, when you're competing against the same group of guys. And let's be honest, at a mid-major school, at a really competitive mid-major school, you still only have 20 competitive players that you're so the ninth man in a split squad roster is going to be a pretty easy out most of the time. So having the ability to really test your freshmen, your guys coming off surgery, your guys that are maybe they've made a significant jump velocity wise or stuff wise or with the bat, you're really looking forward to seeing the development that the outfielder has made. And you get to see them facing outside competition. It's a huge just game changer in terms of the way that the players approach the game, because inevitably we would play NJIT, maybe a junior college. We'd play who do we play before Wagner? And those guys want to beat your butt, man. They want to take it to you. So if you don't show up and be ready to play, you're going to fall flat. And
it's a lot more like an actual game like environment than just an inter squad, right?
Absolutely. And every coach, every team is going to have a different set of issues with it. If you are banged up that fall, it's going to be hard to compete in that game because you want to try to get everybody innings. Maybe your number one guy threw a ton of innings over the summer. You don't want to stress him too much. Maybe he sits that one out. Maybe you have a couple other guys. It's one of those things that it can be a delicate balance as well. Just making sure you have enough guys that can compete in that game. Because usually they're about 14, 18 innings long. They don't put a cap on the number of innings you can play. They put a cap on the number of days you can compete. I see Canes Cats Heat. Don't disrespect NJIT. Oh no. NJIT whooped us a couple times.
We know NJIT is a big program, man.
Giuseppe Papaccio is the assistant at Seton Hall. He was one of the mainstays and reasons why that team really turned it on. They went to a regional down, I think it was in Arkansas, and won a game. I have a ton of respect for those guys. But they would compete really well in the fall against us. And I think one year maybe they beat us, if not. But during the regular season, it was always a competitive game. And that's part of it too, right? Is, hey, guys, we know we're going to play these guys in the spring. Let's
see what they got.
Let's not,
maybe not show them what we got, but let's see what they got.
And then, but also we would compete against junior colleges. And I think now more than ever, we were looking to schedule some Division III games. It's a recruiting tool. So if you're going to play NJIT, maybe their shortstop is a guy that is looking to go into the portal, and once he hits the portal, you have a really good scouting report on him, and you know what kind of player he is. The same thing with junior college, Division III. You got those guys are going to perform. So in that sense, I think it helps. The lower level teams get that a little bit of exposure. But I just think that's what you're there to do. You're there to coach games. You're there to coach players in the development process. And the only way that you really know that it's working is through competition.
100%.
So
Canes, we're going to catch up on all the comments from Canes besides the NJIT one. Truthfully, kids have been hit with a lot of change in the last 12 months. A lot of those kids in this current freshman class committed in 8th or 9th grade at the elite schools. I will give leeway to them. But for the 2026 and going forward, if these kids aren't doing more research and hiring advisors like yourself, Kyle, and Pat, then it's on them. I want to win ball games and win a national title. And then he says, I didn't respect NJIT, and they taught us a lesson on opening night. and like Pink, it's like we talk about this all the time, but like the parity in college baseball, it's like anyone can beat anyone, you know, on any night. So and those are the type of games where, like up for a Miami Canes, when you don't take those games seriously and you lose 3 months down the line when it's selection, you know, Monday, it can hurt you. So Michael Nodelman says, any discussions about red shirts at ABCA, or is that pretty much settled as red shirts count against the 34? Pink, you got anything to say about that?
No, I hadn't heard about that. As far as I know, you know, if it's a medical red shirt,
yeah, it's
not going to count against the 34. Yeah. They have done this thing now where they kind of gray shirt guys.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different ball game in and of itself. But I hadn't heard anything about it.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I haven't really looked into it much, so I don't want to comment too aggressively on it. But
yeah, me too. I mean, I don't think, to me, yeah, I mean, medical red shirt, there's no way they could say, oh, you can't get it. You got Tommy John and you didn't play at all, but you still lose a year of eligibility. But I have not. I think, Michael, that's going to come out in the fine print that keeps getting talked about here in the next few months. So I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. Again, there's a lot of people out there, and I guess it kind of segues into this. I mean, a lot of people out there right now, Pink, are saying this 38-man roster is 100%. NCAA's come out with it. It's it's the new rule, but you and I know it's just a proposal, right? Yeah. The coaches, and they have to get certification from their conferences that they agree to it before it can even become official. So like this, we still got a lot of time before we find out really what the final product of this whole settlement looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's ultimately always important to understand that the NCAA always floats these things first.
Yeah.
To see what the backlash is going to be. And then once they kind of realize, okay, the coaches at the higher levels are okay with it, or, it's kind of mediocre, like backlash, like, okay, we'll push it through.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's legislation obviously takes time. I think it's common where people just knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. I can't believe this is happening. Thank God there's a fourth assistant. Thank God there's this and that. But, all they're doing, all the NCAA consistently does is say the schools have the ability to do this.
Yeah.
Not they have to, or
nothing's mandated.
Not we're going to support it. And so they just kind of like, throw out these legislation ideas and just to sort of see, hey, what sticks, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think one of the next things. So the second part of the proposal that gets voted on January 15th as well is, and I think this makes just too much sense, Pink, but making it to where practice can start 35 days before your first game. So essentially, right when you get back from Christmas break.
How is that different?
I think you can go straight. I think what they're proposing is that you can go straight into inter squad full practice
instead of having
individuals for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, or whatever. And then you got 2.5, 3 weeks to build up arms as best you can, and have your hitters see live pitching in a game like environment. I think that just makes too much sense, right?
It does, but I mean, it's kind of silly, but the way that the season is scheduled anyway, it's just a nightmare.
Yeah.
As a pitching coach, you're always sort of crossing your fingers and hoping that all your guys are doing what they need to do, because the NCAA and its infinite wisdom says you can't communicate with your players, you can't work with them. I know occasionally the local players would often come back to campus and throw on their own, and that would be something that would be able to kind of help in the development process, the build-up process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even during COVID, we had to fight like hell just to get an extra week prior to returning to school.
Yeah.
Just to get the kids on campus, because everything was closed. Everything was, we had to like go to the administration and say, we need our cages open because our guys are here.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling them to come back early to test. You can't have 0 facilities open for them, because then that's a week that they can't
do anything.
Yeah. So we would have to test early and do all that stuff. And I mean, it's just, it would make complete sense that they would say, hey, go right into it. I mean, I think for a lot of Northeast schools, it's almost easier to do the individual stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a team practice and just do it individually, like small groups.
Yeah.
But down South, I mean, they could, get right into it and start getting going. But
so talk to people about, like you mentioned, how the NCAA, I mean, no communication with players. You really can't, like, you have no idea if they're getting their work done over the winter and stuff like that. Like, talk to the average viewer, player, parent who doesn't really know how that works. Explain that to them.
So we would come back typically from Thanksgiving break and maybe have like a week where we could work with the players on an individual basis, your 8-hour time segment. There's the fall, there's a 40-day period to get 35 practices in, something like that.
Yep.
And then everything else is individuals. Well, once a week before exams start, you're not allowed to work with your players at all. I think there was always like a little bit of if they ask you to come throw you batting practice, you could do it. But it was one of those things where basically from December 10th-ish or sooner, you were no longer able to work with your players, communicate with them on what they're doing, get videos or things like that. And so then most of the time the players wouldn't come back until after Martin Luther King Day, which is like mid-January. So you're looking at almost over 30 days where the impact of your season is like in the balance, because your ace pitcher is not building up properly. He's not able to deal with the ups and downs of it, or you can't talk to your closer or your hitter that has a hamstring or things like that. But once you get on campus, it's like, hey, we got to get going, because then there's only another 30 days until the season starts. So the season in NCAA Division I is a hard cap on February 18th-ish, like somewhere around there. Yeah. Middle to third week of February. And you got to have a day off. You're going to get snowed out in the Northeast a couple of days where you got, it's just, you're not going to be able to get outside every weekend or every day. So it's a mad dash to make sure guys are ready. So that block of time over Christmas break and New Year's where you don't have any ability to communicate with your players or work with them, it's just kind of irresponsible, I think, by the NCAA. But
it doesn't make much sense.
Fall sports arrive well before the school year starts, and they're able to practice and communicate. Yep. Why is it that on a summer break you can do that, but you can't do that with a winter break? I'm sure they have a good reason, but it just seems like it's not the smartest thing.
Yeah, and it's like you said. I mean, you may have one of your weekend starters or whatever is just like kind of, there's no way to check up, make sure they're getting and hold them accountable. Yeah. And then, like you said, if that guy just kind of sits at home all for the month and doesn't do anything and shows up and his velo's down and he hadn't thrown it all in a month, so you think you're building him up from where you left him, but not, you're having to build him up from way further behind, and now he ain't gonna be ready for opening day. Yeah. So I mean, I think it like you said, the guys up in the northern states where a lot of those guys aren't able to get out and do a full practice unless they have an indoor facility that kind of facilitates it. But certainly the ones down south where it's not 10 degrees outside will be able to build up their guys a little bit better. So let's move to the JUCO stuff. Obviously, that's been kind of going off the rails for the last couple of weeks. Did you talk to any coaches over the week at ABCA where what their opinions were on it, what they thought moving forward was going to happen with that?
Yeah, I talked to a couple specifically about it. I mean, I'll be honest, a lot of the times when I'm talking with coaches that I've known for a while, it's less shop and more just,
Yeah.
hey, how was your New Year's, or what'd you do for a vacation, right? Because they get enough of that from everybody else. But the couple coaches that I did talk to at the Division I level just basically said it's going to be a significant change that once again they have to adapt to. I've heard some guys. I was talking to a scout of mine that was a travel ball coach, and he's dialed into the college scene and everything. And he was just like, "Why would you recruit a high school kid ever after this?"
Yeah.
And in some instances, it does make sense. I think right now there's a lot of mid-major coaches that are thinking they could probably get a few better players based on it. But I still kind of think that some of the mid-major schools are going to have a couple high school players every year, a handful of high school players every year just to fill the roster because, regardless of, every sort of model of recruiting, whether it's the portal, recruiting high school guys, junior college guys, you're always going to miss out on the guy that you want.
Yeah.
And if you can't find a guy in the portal that is going to be good enough to play at Seton Hall or Elon or UVA, then you're going to go to the next option.
Yeah.
So, hey, man, we just can't find a guy in the portal that suits our need. Let's go to the junior college option. Okay, let's, you recruit all the junior college guys. You're trying to find a fit. You're trying to find a fit, and you're just like, man, none of these guys are what we want. Okay, now let's go to maybe high school and just get a guy there. I still think that's going to be a thing, no matter what. But I do think it could really impact, the number of spots for high school guys. It was already shrinking, and now, depending on how aggressively these schools take that nugget and go, like it could be a significant change for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, the guys that I talked to, because obviously right now the waiver applies only to people who played junior college and now their college eligibility ends this academic year. So a lot of people out there are basically pushing it as it's a done deal. You get 2 years of free non-eligibility, or at least not counting against your eligibility. But right now it's just you get 1 year extra if you went to a junior college and your eligibility ends this academic year. But like NIL, like the portal, all the coaches I talked to said, as soon as enough guys start going, well, why aren't we getting this? Sue, it's going to be a thing. And then the question, basically, they're just like, it's just a matter of, are they going to give them 1 year extra eligibility or is it going to be 2?
Right.
And the NCAA's already come out and said their kind of future outlook is that you get 5 years of eligibility at the NCAA in 5 years instead of 4 years of eligibility in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was talking to Scott Daly, the former assistant at UGA, the second day, and he was like, I remember a lot of guys saying that first year at the portal, like, we're still going to recruit a bunch of high school guys and, we're still going to be, that's our bread and butter. That's our foundation. And he goes 2 years later, like, they're all recruiting a bunch of portal guys now because you can't. And Pink, you're really well positioned to talk about this. So just talk to the people listening that what's the percentage, generally speaking, of you bring in 12, or let's just go with 10 high school players, how many of them are going to be impactful contributors to your team?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why people are recruiting more portal guys now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at least the schools that I was at, it was always our mission to make sure that we were recruiting guys that we thought could compete and be impactful year one.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's very different when you're at Fordham, Seton Hall, whatever, than an LSU or Texas.
Yep.
But out of a 10 to 12 man class, I mean, you're looking at 3 to 4 pitchers, if not more. You're hoping that one can challenge for a weekend spot.
Yeah.
One's going to be able to maybe be a developmental midweek arm, and then one, hopefully, a bullpen piece.
Yeah.
You're looking for your position players to challenge the upperclassmen. You know, the old saying was, "Hey, once you step foot on campus as a freshman, we're looking to replace you."
Yeah.
Not in a good way, but or I'm sorry, not in a bad way, but in a good way. Like, hey, we want a better player than we currently have. It's always difficult to do, but
yeah.
You're looking for that kid to challenge and at a minimum kind of, split time and get some ABs and develop, but you're not looking for a shortstop to come in and replace your junior shortstop. Like, it's just not reality.
Yeah.
But you are saying, hey, maybe he can play second base, and we have a sophomore at second base that just didn't quite make that jump, and he can challenge for that spot. So when you're doing that, the idea is those. So basically, that's like 5 to 6 players. So almost half the class.
So like best case scenario, you think it's like 50% end up being, like a major, like a guy who becomes a starter in the lineup,
right?
Or an impactful arm in your pitching in your pitching staff,
right?
And so then, so before Manny. Welcome back, Manny says, would you say most players come back ready after break, or do you see guys regress from not getting their work in? What do you think, Ping?
It's not a regression. It's just a lack of preparedness.
Yeah. They're not like losing their overall like velo or something like that, but like you could tell like this guy hadn't been throwing.
Like a third of the pitchers are ready to go. They're just basically rubber stamp it. Hey, I'm good. They take care of business. Maybe they've developed a little bit. Some of the guys after their first outing are like, Coach, my arm's really sore. Okay, well, how often, how many pens have you thrown, whatever.
That's a good sign, right? That's a good sign they didn't do something.
Right. And then a third of the, I guess it's a mix. You split that last third. Like some guys maybe made a significant jump over break because they worked their ass off.
Yep.
Some guys didn't do anything and they're just not as good. Position players, it's usually tough to tell, but a lot of them don't usually do enough sprint work. Their arms aren't in shape, and then they haven't seen enough velo. They're going to be behind the 8 ball. Some guys are taking live ABs every day or whatever it is, twice a week, 3 times a week, and they're just dialed in.
Yeah.
So it's truly individual. It just depends. If you have a really solid group of guys that are regional that can all work together, it's a huge impact.
Yeah.
But the only time I've really ever seen a pitcher regress was due to injury. I don't. Maybe there was 1 or 2 here and there that the next year they came back. It was just their stuff wasn't as good, or they were trying too hard, that sort of thing. But
they tried to make like a big change, and all of a sudden it made them worse.
Yeah, it wasn't. Pitching is a little bit different than hitting. Like obviously, you're a freshman, you go out there and you become a freshman All-American, all of a sudden everybody's going to be dialed into exploiting your weaknesses a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So you maybe have a sophomore slump, hitting really hard. It's based in failure. So, but it usually wasn't guys getting worse. It's just they weren't prepared for the workload.
Yeah.
Sprinting every day, doing the workouts 3 days a week. It goes from 0 to 100, and if you're not 75% there, then it's going to be tough. So then your performance suffers just because you're not ready. But kids typically know what the assignment is, and they develop and they get better, or they're ready to go. But there's definitely guys that I coached, some of them are players in the big leagues now that just wanted that nice little stretch where they didn't have to pick up a ball for a little too long, and they come back and it's like, zap, man, Coach, my elbow doesn't feel real good right now. Can I take a week off? It hurts them.
And you're like, dude, we got 2 weeks till the season starts. Like, what are you talking about? Manny,
there's no other sport that requires a player to go from a break to full competition in 30 days where the injury risk is that dramatic.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you put a basketball player on the same schedule as a baseball pitcher per se, like, yeah, you're going to be ready because you're just running around. Like, your hamstring can adapt, and if they tear their ACL, okay, that ruins their season,
Yeah.
but it doesn't potentially ruin their career.
Yeah.
So the workload that pitchers are under, like, it's just a mismatch. There's very few, like, even football, they're there all summer. Soccer, there's not really a pitch count. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing analogous to what a baseball pitcher has to go through to get prepared for their season.
Yeah. You're 100% right. It's like pitching. Baseball, or hitters, you can come in and you're, like you said, you're not going to be able to, you're going to be behind the eight ball trying to kind of reacclimate to velocity.
Yeah.
Your swing's going to feel a little bit different. Your arm, if it's not in shape, like is going to be a little bit off. But pitching, not only are you going to be behind the eight ball because you've lost your feel for your pitches and you're trying to get that back, but you haven't thrown in a month and now you're trying to ramp up real fast.
Yeah.
Risk of injury goes way up.
Yeah, that's how and when you do shutdowns and buildups, that's a whole another set like conversation. But I think most people are getting the idea now.
Yeah.
I still think it's a factor in the injury issue, but it's not the only one, obviously. But
yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Pink, because I've talked about it a few times, and like I always say, I mean, I was a hitter. I'm not an expert on pitching. I know how good pitchers got me out, so I know how you can pitch effectively. But on the injury front, and this is kind of my opinion, but it seems like once a kid gets to kind of that adult age, he's 18, 19, whatever, we've done all this stuff to really, limit pitches. Pitch counts are lower than they've ever been. Guys, even juniors, that first game now for a Friday starter, when I was playing, it was like you could go complete game. Now it's like, oh, he's going 75 or he's going 70. But it also seems like as we've done that, arm injuries have continued to increase. So do you think at some point, and you may totally disagree with me, do you think at some point, like your arm's developed enough and you've grown into your kind of adult body to where now pitchers' arms really aren't conditioned to throw? You ramp up, but you also are just not conditioned to throw a lot of pitches, and so eventually the arm injuries occur because of that.
Right. Yeah. I think whenever I talk about injuries, I always preface it with I'm not a strength and conditioning specialist.
Sure.
I don't know everything about every aspect of, the biomechanics, physiological issues, things like that. I have some biomechanical information. I have some workload information. I have a lot of, strength and conditioning information, but it's like when you look at how much information is being sort of pushed into the space of helping pitchers throw harder.
Yeah.
It really is amazing how we're maximizing the body.
Yeah.
But I can ultimately just say this: pitchers are training so much differently now than they ever have, and they are pitching far less than they ever have.
Yeah.
So when you look at, everybody goes, oh yeah, Nolan Ryan, and Tom House was on the hot stove panel. Shout out to Tom. He's a legend. And I actually told him, I said, the first time he came and did a clinic at our academy, I was 10 years old. It was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Nolan Ryan would go out and throw 130 pitches, but then he would throw BP like 2 days later. So he wasn't training with plyos and, he'd lift, but it wasn't the way that he would train to pitch would be to throw a baseball.
Yeah.
And so while I do think that the plyos work, I've seen them, I've used them with guys, I've gotten guys to improve their velocity or their, whatever it may be, whether it's mechanical or just strength. It's a tool, it's a part of the equation, but there's something to be said for, hey, maybe the best medicine for you to develop isn't taking a large chunk of time off and then going right into a velocity program that requires you to throw the ball as hard as you can.
Yeah.
Maybe you should continue to throw during that quote unquote shutdown period, just play catch, not throw bullpens or long toss, but still using that time to build, arm durability.
Yeah.
So that you're able to then go into your preparation phase and you're in a much better position foundationally to let it rip or to go into bullpens or whatever it may be. But I it's just one of those things where I think you look at the number of kids. I mean, I talked to Josh Epstein at Richmond, and he's got I think it was a large number. I don't want to misquote, but it was a large number of freshmen that have come in over the last 3 years that he's been there that have had a significant injury.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they're
while on campus,
they're injured either coming into or shortly upon.
Yeah.
So the fall of their freshman year, they have an injury, or they're, it's all lower back, it's all elbow, it's all shoulder. So you're taking kids that are functionally don't move well, they're not strong enough to do it, and you're basically, as my friend Nunzio Signore said, shooting a cannonball out of a canoe.
Yeah.
There's just no foundation for what they're asking their body to do.
Yeah. That's a good point. 100%.
So forget about, the pitch counts. The pitch counts are probably the thing that's preventing more injuries. It could be. I don't know. But
yeah.
I think it's a systemic thing where, yes, velocity plays, and velocity is important nowadays in today's game at every level. People are chasing it. And when you throw the ball hard for a large number of throws, you're putting your body more at risk for injury. You just can't get around it. The best thing you can do is hold it off for as long as possible, because even Nolan Ryan tore his UCL at the end of his career.
Yeah.
Guys like Randy Johnson, their arm was healthy, but they had a back issue. All these guys, they throw the ball long enough. I mean, there's only been 27,000 big leaguers in the history of the game, and there's only been how many guys that have pitched for 20 years that have not had an injury?
Not a lot.
So it's kind of it's just, it's part of the deal now.
It is, yeah. And I think that is 100% a great point, that guys you're just not physically, you have 15, 16-year-olds who aren't physically mature. And like you said, it's like shooting a cannonball out of a canoe. The canoe is ultimately going to collapse. Maybe not the first time it shoots the cannonball, but the 10th time that thing's going to break.
People don't realize the UCL ligament will break under the force of just one throw if that is the only thing that is supporting the load.
Yeah.
So if you just take the UCL ligament and remove all the other supporting muscles around it, and you just pull on that ligament enough, I think it's 75 Newton meters or something like that. If you just do that, it snaps once. One yank on it, one throw is enough to break it. The reason why it doesn't break is everything else around it. So if you don't have the ability to control everything else around it and support it, then you're looking at inevitable disaster.
So your advice to a lot of young pitchers would be, listen, again, it's velocity, like we know, is the number one gatekeeper to what level you're going to, you could be the best pitcher in the world, but if you're throwing 79, right. Tennessee's not going to want you, at least not yet. So if you are training velocity, you better be training as hard or more in the weight room to build that foundational strength around the arm, the lower half, the back, the shoulder, everything, to make your arm kind of as bulletproof as possible.
Yeah, and there's never been more resources in terms of Alan Jaeger with throwing schedule, Eric Cressy, Tread Athletics, Driveline. All those guys are putting out a lot of free information that can be really helpful to kids at all levels. And I actually, I think Kyle Bodie said it. I think I heard it from him, but I've talked to a number of coaches, and I said, if you took a kid and didn't have him play baseball his freshman year of high school and just had him strength train, they would be in a much better position, by a significant margin, to maintain their strength throughout the 4 years of high school than they would by playing baseball and then trying to lift on those off times.
Yeah.
Because the foundation of strength that they would get in that 12 months would just be, like you're saying, almost bulletproof. He also had talked recently, it was a couple months ago, probably, more about skill acquisition and playing travel ball at the young age. Like,
Yeah.
if you're pitching 7 innings or 6 innings in a 12U tournament and you're doing that all summer, all fall, and all spring, like, your body's going to be
You're
torn
cooked.
down. And what he's basically saying is, like, there's only a limit to the level of skill adaptation that you can get from that.
Yeah.
So why put your body through that, when risk the injury potential down the road, when you could be, putting in some serious strength and just building that foundation for later.
Yeah. So let's get into the pitching hot stove this year. Obviously, you host it every year. So going through the guest list, had Coach Capon, from the associate head coach at Georgetown Baseball, Caleb Longshore, pitching coordinator from the Cleveland Guardians, Jimmy Jackson, pitching coach from Maryland. We had Weston Lombard, and then last but not least, Max Weiner from Texas, and most recently Texas A&M. So of the, all those guys talking, Pink, like, what were some of your takeaways from the discussion? Tom House as well. What were some of the takeaways you think players and parents need to know?
So when I put together that group, when I asked those guys to join, I didn't really have a topic in mind yet.
Yeah.
And then I was touching base with them here and there. And I basically said, hey, I think command would be a really good idea if we think we can do it the right way. Like, I get it. I've talked to enough pitching coaches at the pro level, college level, that, stuff does play, but
100%.
if you're 12 or 13, 14, like, how good is your stuff?
Yeah.
Unless you're throwing, 75 to 80 at that age, like, your stuff is just going to be average regardless.
Yeah.
Your first year on the big field, your stuff's going to be average. How can we do things to give guys weapons or tools in the toolbox to kind of help with the command question? And as I was discussing it with them, it became really apparent that we could attack the subject from 3 different perspectives. And I thought they did an awesome job. I mean, I just gave them that and they just ran with it. Caleb, who's with the Guardians now, he did a really good job on, tying in analytics, but also giving people a really good way to just do it on their own.
Yeah.
Pen and paper, understanding misplots, and the fact that, hey, if you're a right-handed low arm slot guy, your miss patterns are probably going to be in the direction of your spin angles.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to throw the ball down, glove side to a righty, and you can't consistently hit that spot, hey, maybe we shouldn't throw the ball there then.
Yeah.
Not give up on it, but lean into your strengths. And I thought that was a huge, huge message, because I can't tell you how many even college pitchers that I had worked with that are sinker slider guys, and all of a sudden you get an 0-2 count and the catcher says, throw that ball, elevated fastball. And it's like, it's a foul ball, or if it's a pop fly and we got to run on third base. I'm like, what are we doing? Like,
yeah.
And they say, oh, well, I just, wanted to get a swing and miss. And I'm like, okay, well, what's your best pitch? And they're like, fastball down and in. I said, yeah, like that.
100%.
You don't have the stuff or the ability to command that pitch because of your stuff.
Yeah. You're going to try to hit the top of the zone and you end up throwing it right down the middle.
Yeah. And it's going to come down in the barrel.
Yeah.
And so I thought that message was ultimately extremely important with all levels of coaches, but the lower levels could take something from that and say, hey, we have the ability to understand what's the most likely miss for this kid in this zone, and then what are zones that we shouldn't attack with this kid. And then with Jimmy Jackson, he talked a lot about motor preferences this weekend. Obviously, Matt Swope at Maryland, and he did a presentation on the youth stage that was awesome, diving into more detail about the actual preferences, like the difference between an aerial and a terrestrial.
Yep.
But ultimately, what he was doing at the hot stove was talking about trying to find ways to let your players move the way that their body was intended so that you have success and you're able to develop at a higher level. And ultimately, as a pitching coach, the reason why the motor preferences stuff rings true to me is you take a kid and you put him a pitcher, you put him at shortstop and you say, okay, I'm going to make you turn a double play, and you do it. And then you go put that kid on the mound and say, throw a pitch. Their arm action is going to be significantly different because of the traditional, hey, thumb to thigh, fingers to the sky type of pitching mechanics. We never think to change a kid's arm action at shortstop or in the outfield because of power.
Yeah.
But then when you're on the mound, it's like, oh, no, get your arm way back and you're going to throw the ball harder. So just getting kids to understand, or I'm sorry, coaches to understand that kids oftentimes are coached out of their preferences.
Sure.
And here are things that you can do to try to make sure you're allowing them to use their body the way that it is intended. Because once you do that, you find command and stuff work. And I think that's a big deal. I think even Caleb touched on, pronators, supinators. If you got a kid who can't pronate the ball, which is take your hand down and in, you're probably not going to be able to throw a really good circle changeup or, changeup that you turn over.
Yeah.
Best idea is to throw a split and stick with stuff that spins, like a slider or a cutter.
Yeah.
That's a part of command. Understanding your body's preference with pronation, supination can drastically help your ability to throw an off-speed pitch in the zone. And for that matter, the stuff might be better because you're leaning into it and you're understanding that, hey, this is my go-to. And then with Capon, George is a former student of ours from the academy, and he's always had a tremendous sort of background in mental game and understanding how to get pitchers to really compete at their highest level by getting them mentally to really dial into how their body's moving, how they should be competing, what the weaknesses are of the hitter. Like it wasn't mental game as you would think as like Ken Ravizza, Alan Jaeger. It was more, hey, this is what we're going to do. So mentally, when you go out on the mound, you are strapped and you are ready to go because you've prepared yourself. And that's the command is going to show up because of the things that we've done on a, obviously mental skills, but more physical, and then how to connect the mental so that you kind of have a really good bulletproof mindset. And then Max Weiner was awesome. I mean, he just let it rip. There, a lot of questions about command and strength training and things like that. And he really kind of went the cerebral route and just sort of said, look, if you're trying to say that pitchers need to lift more, he goes, well, what's the problem with where we are as a coaching community where we're not asking kids to just lift more in general and make that a cultural thing. And a lot of his points were more big picture and understanding that you really have to have a different mindset as a coach or a player to really have success. Tom is always great talking about the mechanical side and understanding the dynamic between what's it called, like the metric side of it, the biomechanical side of it, but then also just sort of the confirmation bias that people have, the things that people are always saying, oh, this is the way I used to do it. He's always great at, pushing that needle forward and saying the anecdotal evidence doesn't work anymore. Like, we have to do this at an elite level. We have to make sure that we understand that, hey, your front leg is not tied to your arm. People do it. Make sure that they're there. They can be strong enough. Like, if your front knee is bent, great. Make sure they do it all the time. If your front knee is extended, fine. But it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with, velocity as a whole for everybody.
Yeah.
But it could be for this person or that person. But yeah, no, it was a great night. I think we didn't get out of there until like 12:15 a.m. So it was good. It was a blast, and the guys really, I always say that I don't run the hot stove. I just kind of facilitate it, and the coaches usually just always deliver because I try to select guys that I know are interested in really pushing the needle forward. They're anxious to get on the panel and do the hot stove, but it's just been great to have such great coaches be a part of it, and year in and year out they do always do a smash up job. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so Brad Thomas asks a question: what are D2 coaches contemplating with what these D1 changes, or with these D1 changes, and what's your guess on what will happen at that level going forward? I'll go first, Pink. So the D2 coaches, one thing they're worried about is obviously the ramifications if the JUCO stuff ends up becoming a thing, because then, Brad, if your choice is between a JUCO and a D2, but at JUCO you don't lose eligibility, why would you go to a D2?
Right.
And so, like, I don't know what you think on that, Pink, but I think if everything happens like everything else has happened, and this JUCO thing becomes a reality with either them getting 1 year of eligibility not counting, or 2, like D2, it's going to be way harder to recruit at a Division II unless you're a top program.
Yeah,
because like everyone's trying to transfer anyway, and if you're not losing eligibility at junior college, why would you not just go JUCO?
Yeah, and I know a lot of Division II coaches that have told me they are already pretty heavy in the JUCO space, so they're just going to kind of double down on that. I think a lot of them will likely get more kickbacks from the lower level D1s.
Yeah.
So if I'm at a mid-major and I'm not getting a ton of playing time or innings, chances of me transferring to another low-level mid-major, or Division I are probably pretty slim. So especially if I don't play a lot, so that player now becomes, hey, I can go to Division II because I've got some high school stats and summer ball or whatever. But yeah, just like anything, I think it's going to be a very difficult proposition for those coaches to manage. To be honest with you, something that I heard this weekend that I think is a big question that we're overlooking is junior college. How are the junior college programs going to deal with this?
Yeah.
Like, do they have the infrastructure to to deal with 1,000, if not, it's probably gonna be way more than that.
Yeah.
Probably another 5,000 players looking to, banging on their door.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, I want to come to your school so that I don't lose eligibility and then develop and hopefully into a Power 4, Power 5 type pitcher. Obviously, the trickle down effect will be even all, it will reach them.
100%. 100%.
So they won't be taking the player that needs the development. They'll be taking the kid that's ready to go, and they just want 2 extra years of eligibility. But I mean, it was a really legit question. I hadn't thought about it yet, but yeah, I mean, do they not every junior college opportunity is built the same, just like Division I baseball. I mean, there's there's Division III facilities that devastate some Division I facilities.
Yeah.
They just are so much better. Same thing with junior college. Like you go to junior college out in California, you're looking at Division I type facilities.
Yep.
Or in Texas or whatever. But then you also have Division III JUCOs that don't have any money, scholarship money, and they're just looking to run the program. They may have one coach, no strength coach, 50 kids.
Yep.
It's just kind of roll the balls out and play. That development opportunity is not the same as potentially a school that has sent guys to Oklahoma or Florida State, whatever, year after year after year, and they've got nice facilities, adequate coaching, development programs, you know. So maybe that junior college guy kind of gets bumped out. Maybe that Division II guy that typically was, hey, come in for a year or two, develop, and then you'll be a stud junior, senior year, that guy's bumped out as well.
Yeah, and what about, you know, I think that's a great point of things kind of being overlooked. It's like if all of a sudden the demand at junior college is just way higher, there's probably not, like you said, I mean, there's really good facilities wise and competition wise, California, Texas, like the Panhandle, Southeast, but everywhere else, it's kind of like that's kind of like a not as, you know, like John Murphy tells us all the time. He's like, there's not as much interest in the Northeast for junior college as there is in the South or those other regions. But the other thing is, like, a lot of people don't realize that at junior college, Pink, you know, they bring in a lot of players too. You know, more than, you know, even some of them more than the guys that over recruited at Division I level. So all of a sudden you're going in with 60 guys at a junior college, hoping you may not lose eligibility, but you may not play either.
Right. Or you only play and it's in a few games and you just, you know, because you're just going to practice and getting your swings in, you maybe not getting that development piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see junior colleges all of a sudden coming up with, you know, let's say each junior college that has a decent baseball program now has the ability to bring in 20 extra players. It's great financially for them, but I don't think that's going to turn into full-time paid assistants, full-time paid second assistants, you know, facility improvements. Like that stuff is going to be a slow burn. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
It's going to be interesting. Kane says not every school is Chipola. Yeah. I mean, that's right. I mean, again, it's like you said, Pink, there's junior colleges that are run like high-level D1 programs, and there's junior colleges that are not as great at facilities. And like you said, JUCO was always the place you went that, you kind of knew going in, you're not going to get the experience of a really big Division I school, but you knew I'm going to get at bats, I'm going to get to develop, and then I can transfer up and I have a kind of a track record. But back to, you know, we were talking about before we started talking about answering some questions, but you know, the amount of high school kids when you bring them in, how many of them turn out to be players. And the reason that coaches are going more and more to the portal, Pink, is because they've put up numbers at the college level and they're just way more likely to put up similar numbers wherever they end up. Right. So, you know, and you and I have talked to coaches and they're like, if my job's on the line, I'm going with the guy who's put up numbers, right, at a high level in college.
Yeah, and I don't, you know, if you look at it at the pro model, that's basically what it is now. It's kind of like free agency, but without the ability to lock somebody up for a number of years. But you know, if you're the, you know, the Washington Nationals, that's my team. They're struggling. They need players. They have a bunch of talent in the minor league system that they're starting to bring up to the big leagues. Dylan Cruz, James Wood, you know, those guys. I can't remember the shortstop's name. CJ Abrams.
Yeah.
You know, he led their team in home runs, but he only had 15 or something like that. It was crazy. Like, I think it was fewer than 20. If the Washington Nationals want to get better, they're not looking at – if the Washington Nationals are looking for a World Series next year, they're not going to look in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
They're going to look at getting, you know, Juan Soto back or whoever the stud arm is.
Proven major league talent.
Yeah, like that's until the Nationals do that, they are going to spend the next 3 to 4 years getting slightly bit better.
Yeah.
And as long as Dave Martinez has had a conversation with ownership and the GM, I'm sure they're okay with it.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, like I can't win a World Series when the Dodgers are have the rotation that they have and have the lineups that they have. I can't do it if the Mets are spending $800 billion, whatever it is, on a player.
Yeah.
So in the college space, you got to look at it that way. If you want to slightly get better over the next 5 to 6 years, then you're probably going to go the high school route.
And in like 3 or 4 years, you may end up having a really good team for like a few years.
Yeah, get a couple pieces out of the portal, junior college, add an arm here and there. But like really, if you wanna win next year, and every single school thinks for the most part they have a shot at either winning their conference or improving their record significantly, they're just going to go, hey, I need Shohei Ohtani, I need Juan Soto. I'm not looking for the developmental minor leaguer to come up this way. So it's unfortunate, but it's the way of the world. And I think another thing that I heard this a few years ago, once the portal started really becoming a thing, but as college coaches, we asked for this.
Yeah.
We asked for this pressure because baseball coaches were always egregiously underpaid. And once you start getting coaches making $1 million a year and high 6 figures, and guys making 6 figures even in the mid-major level, the pressure to win is a lot more, and the consequences of losing are greater. So,
that's a great point. And I mean, the joke when we would play, even back in like 2016, 2017, 2018, when we would play Oklahoma City, the Dodgers AAA affiliate, like the joke was they spent more money on their AAA bullpen than like 10 major league teams in their major league bullpen. Right. I mean, you were facing guys on like $1 million deals in AAA.
Yeah.
And like, that's why they win every year, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, Pink. And so in college, it's the same thing. If you want to be really good every year, you got to get the best guys in the portal. You can get the few elite high school players, but like you said, there's going to be some high school players that you think are elite or think are really good and could, fight for a starting spot, end up not being that great at the college level. So if you're going to compete, and Zeke Pinkham said this a few weeks ago, he's like, at Kent State, which is a school that, is obviously a really good mid-major program, but you wouldn't think they may have more scholarship money now than some ACC programs, but they're going to. He's like, we're going to get to 18, 19 scholarships. And he said it's not about building, a 3-year outlook anymore. You're recruiting every year for your immediate needs and what you need to improve. Mm-hmm. Kane says Miami has never taken more than 3 portal players in the last 4 years. This year we took 16 portal guys.
How many? I wonder how many they took from the junior college ranks.
Yeah, that's a good question. Canes, do you know how many they got from the junior college ranks?
Essentially the same thing if you're taking a portal kid or a junior college kid. But it's a good point, because if you're Miami, in all honesty, if you're able to recruit nationally, you're able to get the best pitcher out of New York. You're able to get the best sometimes the best player in Florida. Mm-hmm. But I think the talent that they are able to acquire oftentimes is slightly better than a mid-major team or whatever it is. But he said none this year. I wonder, in the last 3 to 4 years, I'm sure they had a couple junior college players. But it's just the way of the world. I think ultimately too, something else that may be interesting to look into as a advisor, as a recruit, is understanding the coach's level of capacity to recruit the portal and junior college. Like you look at UNC Charlotte, that staff is built to recruit junior college guys and have 30 new guys every year. Like those guys,
the newcomer posts from UNC Charlotte are fun to look at.
Not every single coaching staff is, able to operate in that space. Because it's not easy, man. It's
that's really a lot of phone calls, right, Pink?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, how you recruit and the quickness at how you pull the trigger, and obviously financially there's a side to it. Like if you're able to give NIL money or even just regular scholarship money, that's a big part of it. Like if you can get a kid and he doesn't have to pay for school, how willing are you going to be able to pull that trigger just by seeing Division II numbers, just by seeing good junior college numbers? That's an issue for some coaches. Like, man, I haven't seen this kid pitch. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I can pull the trigger on this kid if we're going to give him a full boat.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe they have to see him, because I know that's especially at the mid-major level. Like they can't miss.
Yeah.
Power 5 level, like you can probably miss on a couple guys because you got really good arms. You can just cut them loose, get another one, but we'll see.
Yeah, and it's like, I think, like you said at UNC Charlotte, I mean, they're kind of built to do that. And if you have kind of an intricate understanding of which junior college conferences are the best, or which, if that one mid-major conference in the Midwest is really good, those numbers are going to translate. And, same with the Northeast, same with the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not even as much about the school they're coming from, but man, he did that in that conference. Like that's going to play. And same at D2, same at D3. And so if you have coaches that really know that, you're going to have an advantage in the portal. So no, I think I think this has been good. Just the stuff we've been able to cover. And I think we're going to try to do this more, guys, just have guys like Pink and some of our other advisors on from different regions that can kind of tell you things that are going on in those regions and everything. And obviously with, we're going to have season.
This was your first convention, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So what were your thoughts on the overall?
Man, it was awesome. Cause I ran into so many guys that I met a guy who I was in spring training with for 1 year in 2015 when I got traded to the Brewers. And, I hadn't seen him in 10 years almost.
Yeah.
And then ran into some ex teammate who was an all-star with me in high A. I hadn't seen him in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple guys I played against maybe in AAA that were guys had big league time and that are high school coaches now. And so, I mean, for me, it was like, just running into guys that you hadn't seen in a while. Talked to Scott Brown from Vandy, and he telling us a story about the 2013 regional when I was there and how he was like, we were in the regional final game and we were pretty excited. We're like, hey, it's like sixth guy on sixth guy, like anyone can win. And he said basically that the guy who was going to start the game was a right-handed pitcher. And he said he went to Corbin and said, they got 8 left-handed hitters in their lineup. Like, we got to go lefty here, And then that guy ultimately ended up just shoving on us.
Yeah.
And so then, just getting stories like that and just connecting with coaches, it was really fun. And it's like you see so many guys you didn't even think you were going to see, and get to talk with so many guys that you do know. And I get being on the flight, being at the airport in Atlanta and talking with Carl Nonamaker and Butch Thompson for an hour before the flight. It was 100% just fun, and a lot of people.
Obviously, DC being, I grew up 30 minutes outside of DC, and you never really think about it because the convention is not always in your backyard, but like people will come just for the day, in and out. And I mean, there was a kid that I played Little League baseball against who's just there with his son. Hadn't seen him since high school baseball. Brothers of guys that I played against in high school or college, and a lot of people from the area that I had seen. Like my high school assistant coach was there. He just took a new job, Galvin Morris.
Yeah.
And actually one of my clients is on his team now. So
Awesome.
it's pretty interesting how the tides have turned. And then there was 3 kids that I coached. One was from 2013. All were there because they're now coaching, either in college or at an academy. So I thought that was the coolest thing. I mean, as you saw, it's like there's so much about learning and about diving into the hot stoves and hearing the speakers, and man, the topics that they had were so diverse. They had vision, mental game. I mean, to see those things being like a mainstay on the main stage, I think that speaks a lot to the growth of baseball.
Yeah, and I think the motor preferences stuff, like you brought up with Jimmy Jackson for the pitching stuff. I went to a hitter. I think it was hosted by Pelotero, but they had Matt Swope there talking motor preferences, and it's one of those things as a player or a former player, you're like, man, I wish I dove or could. I wish that was kind of a thing.
Yeah,
and it was, but it wasn't this widely talked about thing,
Right.
And it's like, man, could I have improved this much more? If I knew? So I mean, it's like players nowadays. It's like there's no excuse. There's so much stuff you can learn and get evaluated by the right people. Like you said, Pink, it's like that motor preferences stuff. It's like understanding the difference between an aerial and a terrestrial, and meaning what things this drill or this mechanical adjustment might have worked for that guy, but why doesn't it work for this guy? It's because he's just not naturally inclined to move that way. So when you try to force him, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I think certainly when you and I were playing, it was it's trial and error. It was like, oh yeah, that worked. Or this one doesn't feel that great.
And I think that's coaching is always going to be that way. And I think the message that I heard from a lot of coaches was, at least if you have a base level knowledge of it, you are able to test and retest, as George Capon said at the hot stove, test and retest, and retest. And if you do that on something like with a motor preferences background, like I said, baseline knowledge, maybe you get to the answer a little bit faster.
Yeah. 100%.
And you're able to pivot, and you're not trying to force a square peg into a round hole where you lose a year of this kid's development or his effectiveness. You're able to amplify his career sooner. So it's always a good jolt of energy before the season gets going to go to that ABCA and see all those people and those coaches just thirsty for information. It was great.
Yeah, it was awesome. All right, guys. So that's going to be it for the day. Again, remember, if you're looking for recruiting help, scan this QR code right here. Fill out the form. We'll meet with you, whichever region you're from, advisor. We'll meet with you and talk about what we do and see if it's a good fit. Pink, thanks for joining, man. We're going to do this.
No problem.
We're going to do this more often with you and other guys and talk. And then we got college baseball season coming up soon, right? So we'll be able to talk about in-game stuff. And you're the pitching guy. So if there's some big thing happens pitching wise, we're going to be talking about it. So, all right, guys, we're going to end it there.
I'm a pitching guy. I'm not the pitching guy.
One of them. So, all right, guys, thanks for joining in. Thanks for asking questions, and we'll be back.